Find out.
Well, I hope you're ready because it's recording, Mark. All right, welcome back, fellas, again to Gentlemen. Another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of bgobsession.com, the newly branded bgobsession.com. Swing by the site. We actually have a new little spot you can get some swag from if you want to so choose, with the new logos, some of the new stuff. As you can see, most of us are donning something new, or at least something related to the team. But what brings us here together today, real quick, through the introductions. Top left, that is Bob, also known as Neophyte. Bottom left is our friend from the Great White North, Paul, known as Canadian Hog. Bottom right is Mark, hails as Ohm on the board. And top right is Boone. His real name is John, but he'll answer to either. And I am Silent Threat. My name is Derek. I believe you can find most of us on Twitter, but you're going to have to find us to ask what our handles are. Please feel free to drop by bgobsession.com. I'm also going to throw out there right now all of the things that we're going to talk about, all the players, most of which will have highlight packages in a thread on the board. So if you want to kind of look back at some of the highlight packages about people that we've been talking about, maybe the highlight packages that jumped out at us, we'll get those shared in the next day or two. Most will be YouTube. They will be credited to whoever made them because none of us have graphic skills that good. Hence the podcast we run. Anyways, I am going to throw things first to Paul, who I believe had guards. Paul, or did you go all offensive line, or is there anybody other named Trevor Penning that we want to draft?
Yeah, no, I stuck to, well, I shouldn't say I stuck to, I addressed the entire offensive line. So I looked at 2 interior guards, and I looked at 1 person who is strictly a tackle as well. So that being said, just a few things that I would like to share in regards to the thought process that I had for presenting guys today. I honestly don't think that we are going to be addressing the offensive guard position in either of our first 2 picks. We had a pretty solid offensive line, as we all know, from last year. We're bringing back 4 of our 5 starters from a year ago, and I throw Wes Schweitzer in there because he has started 18 games for us over the past 2 years. And over and above that, we're bringing in a former All-Pro in Andrew Norwell. So long story short, I think that we're a pretty solid offensive line. You don't need a starter. You're definitely looking at depth positions. If last year taught us anything, you can't have enough depth along the offensive line. We do have a little bit of insurance on the interior. Sadiq Charles had 4 starts. Keith Ismail had a few starts a year ago as well. And Tyler Larson had 3 starts. But as mentioned, we can certainly benefit from some added depth. So the guys that I'm going to be presenting today are not going to be big name players. Again, to be able to acquire some of those guys, I think you're going to have to go first or second round, and we need playmakers in the first and second round. We were very much void of impact offensive players who can light up the score sheet a year ago, and we need more of that. So what I did in trying to come up with a few guys that we might look at is I looked at a few of the tendencies of Ron Rivera in the past with who he has acquired since he's come here with offensive line picks. And there are a few traits that stood out to me. He always looks at bringing in guys who are smart, who have a lot of college experience, who are versatile, who are very mobile and athletic, and on top of that, have a little bit of a nasty edge to them. 3 guys that he's brought in the past are Keith Ismail, Sadiq Charles, and Sam Cosme. All 3 of those guys check off those boxes for smarts, experience, versatility, athleticism, and nastiness. Keith Ismail had 38 starts in college, Sadiq Charles had 28, and Sam Cosme had 34. So I think we're going to follow that same blueprint, looking for those types of players. I have 3 guys that I'm going to get to. My first one, and one of the ones that I really like, out of Central Michigan, is Luke Godeki. There's been a lot of talk about Bernard Raymond, who's going to go really high, who's the left tackle from Central Michigan. But Luke Godeki quietly had a pretty solid college career himself. He missed his 2020 season with a knee injury, but he had a really, really solid start in 2021. The interesting thing about him is he's a converted tight end. So he is, I would say, the one player that doesn't, from this group, that doesn't fit the experience criteria that I talked about for things that Rivera looks like, but he's been a quick study and he's been a quick learner. He's adapted really nicely, and in 2021, he graded out as one of the best run blockers in all of college football. So he's seen as someone who's really pro-ready to be a pretty solid lineman in terms of run blocking. In 2021, he didn't allow any sacks and only 4 hurries. So there's been a lot of progress in regards to pass protection as well. He checks off the athleticism box. He's seen as being a guy who can really climb to the second level well. And when you watch him, he moves like a tight end. And Rivera likes those types of players on the offensive line that have those mobility skills. I mentioned that he doesn't fit the experience. He doesn't check the experience box. He's got 25 starts in his college career at right tackle. So in conclusion, in regards to Luke Godeki, people see him as being a guy who can potentially move inside, but definitely he's seen as someone who's going to have 5-position versatility, and someone who, with a little bit more mentoring and a little bit more seasoning, can turn into a pretty solid player for you along your offensive line. He's going to be a guy that's likely going to be available in the 3rd round. Now, I know we don't have a 3rd round pick, but if we make some moves in terms of potentially dropping down in 1st or whatnot, maybe we get back up into the 3rd. Who knows? Maybe there is the likelihood that he can be available in the early 4th round as well, but we would certainly have to do some maneuvering in terms of being able to get him. So he's probably the highest of the players that I'll talk about in terms of draft grades. Someone who we can get on day 3 and probably late on day 3 is a guard by the name of Spencer Burford, who is out of UTSA. He's 6'5", he's 295 pounds. He has a lot of room to fill out. And it's interesting because the same kinds of things were said about Sadiq Charles and Sam Cosmi, 2 players to have some room to fill out. He helped his team set all sorts of school records this past year in offensive categories for the Roadrunners. They had over 6,100 total yards of offense. They averaged over 36 points per game. He was a first-team All-Conference USA player this past year. He fits and checks off that versatility box that I talk about, which is really big with past offensive line Rivera draft picks. He played right guard as a freshman. He had 11 starts at left guard as a sophomore. As a junior, he had 10 starts between right tackle and left tackle. And as a senior, he had 14 starts at left tackle. So he has all of that versatility and experience that Ron Rivera looks for in his offensive line draft picks. Another guy who's really athletic. He was seen as one of the better players in terms of movement skills at the NFL Combine. He's considered to be really, really good in the screen game and pulling as well. He's often complimented as well for having a really good sense of competitive toughness. Again, this is another player, much like Luke Godeki, who would probably have to move inside to guard in the NFL, is what people are saying. But he's regarded as being someone who can be a high-level backup. It's very important that we're able to develop the bottom of the roster and develop roster spots, 40 to 53, just as well as we can develop spots 1 to 20 on the roster. And he's one of those guys that might fit that bill. So he's a day 3 pick, certainly somebody that you can wait on. The last player that I want to talk about, and I'll try to make this really, really quick because I know you guys have a lot of great things that you want to say. The last guy that I'm going to talk about is a left tackle from Penn State, and that's Rasheed Walker. And I've watched the draft for a really, really long time. I always loved watching it as a kid. You guys have watched it as long as me or probably longer. But it always strikes me as being really interesting because every single year there's always a pick at a position where people say, why the heck did we pick at that position? And I can see the left tackle position as maybe being that position for the Commanders this coming season. On paper, we're set. We have Charles Leno and we re-signed our swing tackle in Cornelius Lucas. So for the next 2 years, we're pretty much set at left tackle. But in 2 years, when both of those guys have their contracts expire, we have a big void there. So do you want to start some succession planning a little bit sooner rather than later? A player like Rasheed Walker out of Penn State maybe gives you that opportunity just to have a guy, sit on the bench, have a guy like Matskos develop him and give him the time to grow into the position. And who knows, maybe potentially take over one day. So with Rasheed Walker, this is a guy who's 6'6", he's 313 pounds. He's only strictly played left tackle at Penn State. He doesn't have that positional versatility like a lot of the other guys, but he meets the experience. He checks off the experience box, 32 career starts at Penn State. He's really applauded for his athleticism and his smarts. And once again, he just checks those boxes for having Rivera traits for offensive linemen. He's seen as having really good size, power, and length, and he is potentially seen as being someone who can eventually start in the NFL. He's got a lot of upside. He's obviously developmental, but we have a great coach in John Matskos who can afford him the opportunity to have that time to develop behind a guy like Leno and Lucas for a few years. He's seen as being a 3rd round pick, maybe in the 4th round as well, possibly being available. So, if we make a surprise pick, who knows? Maybe it can be a guy like Rasheed Walker. The interesting thing about all 3 of these guys is Washington has met with all 3 of them. And in approaching this, I kind of tried to figure out and ask myself, why were we looking at these types of players? And again, it's not a surprise that we met with these kinds of players because they check off a lot of those boxes that previous offensive linemen that Rivera has picked also check off. So that's my little preview of offensive linemen.
With Godeki, that name just sounds like a big time offensive lineman, doesn't it? Luke Godeki.
Godeki.
Future Hall of Famer, Luke Godeki.
Yeah. He's
Good
a
job,
big boy,
Paul.
6'5", 310. That's a big kid.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I can't say any. I'm a little depressed that you didn't talk about Trevor Penning, but I guess that's just kind of a pipe dream. That guy.
Well, and that's the thing. It's I'm sure we would all love to have a player like that, but I tried to take it from the standpoint of what is realistic. And I think if we pick an offensive line very early in that 1st or 2nd round, people are going to be losing their minds. We need playmakers. We need to be able to score points. We can't be that team that wins 17-14 every week.
Very than being the team that loses 17-14 every week.
Yeah, that too.
All right. Well, I thank you very much for that, Paul.
That was good, Paul. My biggest takeaway, other than the names, is going to be the idea that the unpopular draft pick, when everyone on the boards and on social media is going to be saying, what were they thinking with that one? Mm-hmm. But the idea of building offensive line depth, considering where we've seen in the last 10 years where your offensive line starts getting decimated and you're not prepared with 2nd and 3rd level guys, your season's over. So I would not complain about seeing 2nd, certainly even 4th round. I could easily see us taking an O lineman if they find someone that meets all those criteria you were talking about.
I guess I'll tee myself up here. I had quarterbacks, and then we can follow up a little more going forward. So I don't think we take a quarterback at 11, but
They'll really lose their mind if we do. That'll even be more minds getting blown than if we go with
than a left tackle at 11.
I will not be one of them. If we take a quarterback at 11, it's because we're in love with the guy. And if you're in love with the quarterback, you take him.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that. But I think
I do think that it's perfectly within the reasoning that we were to trade back out of 11 and maybe take a quarterback late 1st, early 2nd, if we were to accrue one of those picks as part of us moving back. So if we were to move back from like 11 to, I don't know, Pittsburgh's one that has been linked to Malik Willis. You trade back 11, you move to 20, you pick up their 2022 second, and then a future third or something along those lines. Then you can maybe with that second round pick, you could jostle your way back up late in the first or early second. But the couple names I'm going to talk about, everybody's heard about Pickett. The two that intrigued me the most, the first one I'll talk about is Desmond Ritter. And there was actually a report today that most NFL teams have him with a first round grade, which I wasn't surprised about. I thought he could have been a third rounder if he would have come out last year. And then all he did was throw for 3,334 yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions with a QB rating of 158.7 and lead his team to their first ever college football playoff appearance. So you can only imagine his stock is rising at that point. He's a big kid, very big, and his exact measurables are, sorry, I had him on my stats page. His exact measurables, where did he go? I want to say 6'4", 225, 6'4", 230. But he looks thin. If you watch him play, he looks narrow, which could be a little alarming, but similar to the guard, maybe he's got a little bit room to fill out. Watching him on tape, the ball doesn't explode out of his hands in a way that some of the the Josh Allen ball does, but the ball, but it's effortless. It's one of those kind of motions that he looks very little strain, and you look up and the ball goes 55 in the air. So I've watched a lot of the film where he can hit the out route. He can hit that deep in route that you got to get it between two crashing safeties over linebackers. Outstretched arms, and you got to make sure that you can get it where it needs to be with enough zip, but also enough touch. There aren't very many quarterbacks in this draft that have that, which is why I think he's very intriguing. And he is sneaky athletic. If you've watched him, it's not sneaky, but people don't talk about him for his running ability. But he ran for over 2,000 yards in his college career. So full stats, he with 810 completions on 1,304 attempts. That's a 62% average. Where it gets interesting is he had a 60 early in his freshman season. He threw for 62. Then he dipped to 55 and 19. Then he jumped back up to 66 and 60, almost 65. So he's consistently over the last 2 seasons, which are obviously his most productive and his most recent, in that 65 to 66 range, which is pretty good for a college quarterback. And he's doing it this year against premium competition. They were ranked number 4 in the country. Total stats, he's thrown for over 10,000 yards, 87 touchdowns to 28 interceptions. His career quarterback rating is 145.8. So he passes the statistical test. His concerns, there's been time of inconsistent accuracy, and he tends to miss high. He can get a little excited, but I think some of that stuff's technique and coachable. His footwork can be wonky at times, and by wonky, it just looks like he gets a little happy feet. But they're over the course in the second half of his career in college, you could see him literally in that moment settle and then get his platform. So I think some of that stuff's coachable. And if you were to fall into, I don't know, pick 36, 37, 38, that first 4 or 5 picks in the second round, and we wanted to make a move up to get something like that, I think that would make sense. I think it's still a little early because, like they say, the most famous person in Washington, D.C. is the backup quarterback. So fans and media are going to be clamoring, and it could bother Wentz, but I don't think the locker room would be clamoring at that point. The other name I want to talk about is another guy that's going to be second round or even later, and that's Carson Strong, where Ritter's ball was fluid and it did not explode off, but it had plenty of oomph. Carson Strong's ball explodes out of his hand. It's noticeable. When he pulls it back and lets go of it, it is going to get downfield, and it's going to get there fast. He's another big guy, north of 6'4", I believe, and he's about 240, but he's a statue. He is not athletic. In fact, he rushed for a whopping negative 305 yards in college, which means the only rushing yards he actually tallied were either sacks or failed quarterback sneaks. But passing, 853 attempts for 1,200, or 853 completions at just over 1,250 attempts. That's a 68.1% average. And that's over 3 seasons. His freshman year, he was 63%. And then his sophomore and junior year, he threw for 70% in each of those. 9,379 yards passing, 74 TDs, 19 interceptions. Similar to Ritter, he had 147.5 QB rating. Again, second round guy. I don't think he's going to go 11. He definitely is not worth 11, in my opinion. He can be had later. He's a guy that you can kind of pick up, you can build on. It's a developmental guy. I think he's a little less pro ready than Ritter, but I think he's definitely got more of the pro ready arm. I just wonder if his athleticism and his ability to evade. His biggest concern coming out of college was his knee. He had a knee injury coming in, but he went to the Senior Bowl and he did the entire Senior Bowl practices and games without a brace. So a lot of people are reading that as though that the knee is fine. That would have to be checked out. The concerns are there from any previous knee injury, especially on a quarterback, and a quarterback that big. He's not small and he can't really squirt around and avoid. He could get rolled up on easily, especially if he can't evade the pocket. But between the 5 or 6 quarterbacks that are going to be going early, those 2 guys could be in the second round-ish place if Ritter doesn't climb enough. One last note on this quarterback class is it's very top heavy. It's either first 45 picks or you're down into the mid to late third day. There's not really a third round Kirk Cousins type. There's not a third round Russell Wilson type. And I'm not talking about NFL production. I'm just talking about graded out into those areas. There's not a Davis Mills kind of thing. So if you miss on those guys, then I didn't dig too much into the second half of the draft on that because those are all going to be flyer guys, and there's not really much of an investment there beyond, you take Tom Brady and hope you find Tom Brady.
I think that kid from Notre Dame could be a late guy. They might look at that Cowan, I think his name is Jack Cowan.
Yeah, hang on. I had him pulled up. Let me just sort this if you guys.
He's big. He's very accurate. He's not like an RPO kind of a quarterback, any more of a traditional quarterback, but I just watched some tape on him. I thought he looked pretty good. So I don't know. You're right though. At that point, you kind of are trying to find Russell Wilson or
yeah, it's a later round shot. You're not really going to find yourself. I don't think you're investing late with the hope that you can get somebody like that. You're talking about Jack Cohn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's athletic, 6'3", 218. And sorry, while I have the screen up, I'll go ahead and answer my own question. Measurables. Desmond Ritter is 6'3", 211. Sorry, I actually gave him too much weight. He is 211. He's thin, but he's got room to fill that out. And Carson Strong is 6'3", 226. More of that bigger body.
Let's see, with only 2 picks in the top 100, it's hard for me to see us using precious draft capital this year on a quarterback if it's not going to be in the first or second round.
Yeah, I think you're right. If somebody just shockingly falls that they're in love with, it could happen. But short of that, I'm kind of with you, or kind of with Derek as well, that I would be very surprised to see him do that.
I guess our quarterback room is not desperate anymore, right? You've got Wentz, who we know can start in the NFL, and you've got Taylor Heineke, who we're all pretty convinced can at least be a serviceable NFL quarterback. I wouldn't add a project when we only have 6 picks overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think my thought process is you have 11. If it's up to me, I'm looking wide receiver most likely in the top. It's one of my first playmaker. There's a lot of wide receivers I think worthy of a first round pick. So if you could take that 11th pick, and if Pittsburgh calls and they're desperate to try to get up, ahead of pick your team in the mid teens that because they really want Willis, how hard can you leverage them? But Rivera hasn't shown a propensity to do that. So a lot of this is probably just wishful thinking. But, if I had it my way, we would trade back, add more assets. And then if you take a flyer second round pick on a quarterback, but you still have 3 more picks that you take in the first 3 rounds because of what you've accrued, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world.
Is there anyone you did fall in love with? What do you think about Pickett or Willis? Either one of them float your boat?
Willis, everybody's heard about Willis, and all I can do is reiterate everything else that they've said. Like the ball just explodes out of his hands. It's easily the most physically talented player in the draft, or the quarterback wise. But a lot of what he does is RPO stuff. It's college scheme. I mean, are we talking? I hate to say this, and I'm not, but are we talking RG3 2.0? The guy who's real fast, can throw the ball out of the stadium, but the minute you try to ask him to be able to make a legitimate read or be a legitimate starting NFL quarterback, does he have that progression in him?
And he certainly won't have it coming out of school. I mean, that's a 2 or 3 year project.
Right. And there's a giant red flag that not enough people are talking about. And I don't think, and I'm not saying that this is why he's not going to make it. I don't know, but he left Auburn to go to Liberty. And when he went to Liberty, statistically speaking, he was good, but at Liberty, his stats are still only in 2 full seasons starting. And I say only, but only in 2 full seasons starting in his junior year at Liberty, he had a 64% completion percentage. So it was 170 completions over 265 attempts, 2,250 yards, averaging 8.5. That's fine, but 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. If this was Auburn, I would say that's pretty good. It's the SEC, but he's playing at Liberty. Like, I'm sorry, there's a level of concern there. And then in his junior season, as second, what they list them both as his junior, but his second junior season, he actually went down 3 points in his completion percentage to 61%. He still threw for 2,857 yards and 8.4 average, and it was 27-12. So it was a 2-to-1 ratio. Those last 2 guys I was talking about, Carson Strong doing it at Vada, he was playing against inferior competition. He threw 36-8. You know what I mean? Like almost 4-to-1 versus 2-to-1 against a quote unquote lesser quality of opponent. And Desmond Ritter did it he was doing it they are the American, but he was doing it in his final season against the best competition you can be against. If you want to watch Desmond Ritter, watch the Cincinnati Notre Dame game from this past season. Notre Dame was touted. They had one of the best safeties in the NFL, supposedly coming out into the NFL, Kyle Hamilton. And I watched Ritter. I watched him look Hamilton off multiple times. I watched him make multiple, he's progressing. It's an NFL style offense. But I will also say, you asked him that another one. I like Howell. He's smaller. He is very athletic for his size, kind of surprising. He's not the most accurate, jumps around from 61 to 68 to 62%. But then again, I watched a game where there were probably 3 or 4 drops. And unfortunately, the quarterback doesn't get the pass for that. It's, he still gets punished because it's an incompletion.
It's funny how that works. I went out of my way to watch Howell because I thought that might be a guy. I've been watching the quarterbacks, and I watched him play 3 games this last year, and I came away not liking him at all. Just something about the body language, the production I just didn't see it in the kid, but I know he still looked like he's like a top 5 guy still with the quarterbacks. I said it before, I'll say it again. The only one I'm really excited about this year is Pickett. I may be loud wrong on him, but I think he's going to make someone a really good NFL quarterback.
Well, he's going to get somebody in the top 10, a really good quarterback, because there's no way with Willis or Pickett, both of those. One thing that's true every year, even in seasons where supposedly the quarterback class is weak, we see teams overdraft at quarterback. It happens every single year, no matter who the quarterback prospects are. And so I almost guarantee you Pickett and Willis are both gone before we get there. But if Pickett's sitting there at 11, John, and we don't, I'm going to be bouncing off the walls. We're really actually in a really great position, which I guess is a good segue if we're done talking about quarterbacks. to go into the wide receivers, because we're in a really good position because it's a stocked draft. It's like one of the strongest wide receiver drafts in recent memory. And we're at pick 11, and we know that people are going to overdraft a couple of quarterbacks. So we're in a really great position. We'd be in a great position even if people weren't overdrafting quarterbacks in the top 10. But we just are in a good position for what we need, I think. So before the season, at the end of the season, if you would have asked me, like, do you think Rivera is going to draft a wide receiver with one of the top 2 picks? I would have said no, because I feel like they were looking at it like, well, if Logan comes back healthy and Curtis Samuel returns to being Curtis Samuel, the Carolina version, and Diami Brown takes the next step, which I think we kind of expect him to do. And then of course, Terry, we have a pretty solid receiving group. But then with the Wentz trade, I think that changed the whole landscape, because you're looking at a guy who's probably going to be our quarterback for the next 3 years. And I know we can get out of the contract, but we didn't eat a $28 million cap hit this year and give up picks to do a 1-year rental. I just don't believe that. I think they're going to give him, his remaining contract. And for that reason, I think they don't want the reason that he fails to be that he didn't have weapons. They're going to want to, they spent a lot to get him here, relatively speaking. He's kind of on a cusp of his career, right? He's either going to tank, or he's going to show that he's the guy that he looked like the first couple of years in Philadelphia. So I think that is going to drive them to want to go offensive weapons in the first couple of picks. So I think they are going to draft a wide receiver with one of the first 2 picks, and they might even draft a running back in this draft, even though we could argue we don't need one. I wanted to say one thing. I know there's a lot of smoke about Chris Olave, and probably rightfully so. I believe we've met with him. They really like him. I'm not going to talk about Chris Olave though, because I think the Jets are going to take him at pick 10. They've had him visit, or they're having him in for a visit. I think they really like him, and I think they're going to take him. And I could be wrong, and we may well pick Olave, but that's the reason I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk about 2 guys that I feel like we could pick with the first pick, or if we trade back and they're there, we could pick with an early round pick. And then I'm going to talk about 2 guys that I'm going to call them sleepers, even though in most draft years, they'd probably be late first rounders or early second rounders. They're probably second or third rounders, but they're not in anyone's top 10. So I am calling them sleepers, even though I think both of them are really talented. So I'm going to start with Drake Landon. And a lot of people would have said there's no way Drake Landon's going to be there at 11. And based on his talent, that's probably a reasonable thing to say. But he's a USC junior. He's a big guy, 6'4", 219 pounds, played basketball and football at USC, which is, that tells you what a great athlete he is. Ordinarily, he'd probably be long gone by pick 11, but he broke his ankle. He only played 8 seasons in 2021 and then broke his ankle. That's one reason why he may slip some. But here are his stats for his 8 games: 88 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns in 8 games in 2021. The other reason is the perception is that he's not fast. I think they project his 40 time to be like 4.5-ish. But he's one of those players that you hear that and then you see him, you see the highlights, and he plays a lot faster than that. The reason I love this guy is it's been a long time since we've had a really big, mean possession receiver guy. So I don't care if he's not the fastest guy on the field. The biggest thing about Drake Landon is, you know how Carson Wentz likes to throw those 50-50 balls up? Mark and I watched some highlights when he was down here a couple of weekends ago, and Carson likes to throw that ball up for grabs and rely on his receivers to get it, which sometimes doesn't work out for him. Well, Drake Landon doesn't do 50-50. He does 80-20, because he's going to go up there and grab the damn ball. And again, you'll see it in the highlight package I'm going to post on the board. He's going to go get it. And then after he gets the ball, he is dynamic with it. He's physical. He's also a really tough run blocker, which is hard to find in wide receivers. He runs great routes. He can track a deep ball, and he's got great hands. So the comparison I've seen people make is to Mike Evans, and he can play outside or slot. Probably he would be our other outside wide receiver if we drafted him. So I really love him. Again, the primary thing I focused on is we need somebody who can go up and get 50-50 balls. And I don't know who that would be right now. I mean, Terry can do it, but we saw Terry almost get decapitated a couple times. And I know there were several times last season alone where he went up for crazy circus catches and you were holding your breath that he would get up after them. So I'd feel a lot better with a big guy like Drake Landon out there doing that instead of Terry McLaurin.
Well, and it's an advantage to being a 6'4" guy going after a 50-50 ball over a guy who's 6 feet. Maybe.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, he's a matchup nightmare for corners. The second guy I really love is Jameson Williams, Alabama junior. He's not as big as Landon. He's 6'2", 189. This guy was a star track athlete. So if you want to call Drake Landon Thunder, this guy's the Lightning. He ran a 4.25 40. He's probably the best deep ball threat in this draft amongst a number of really great wide receivers. The guy he's just a freak in terms of speed. He set state records in high school. In 2021, he had 79 catches for almost 1,600 yards, averaged almost 20 yards a catch, and had 15 touchdowns. He did tear his ACL in the national championship game. So that's obviously something to consider, but he is a deep ball home run threat like every time he touches the ball. And that's the other thing Mark and I noticed when we were watching Carson Wentz is he is not afraid to put it down the field, even into coverage at times. But I think he could feast with a kid like this. He's super quick. And you'll see on the highlight reels, if he gets a seam, he is gone. You're not catching him. He's like a big play waiting to happen. He almost reminds me of Deshaun Jackson, but he's faster than Deshaun Jackson, if you can imagine that.
Jeez. I don't suppose he returns punts.
I don't think he did. I don't think he did returns at Alabama. But anyway, he will drop a few, and he's not the blocker. He's not going to be a big blocking wide receiver. But as far as like a deep ball threat, he would be amazing. So those are my two guys that I would love to see us. I didn't mention about 6 other guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Treylon Burks, and George Pickens, who are all also slated to go first or early second round. So there's a lot of good options out there, but those are the guys that I like the best. And then my last two guys, I'll try to move quickly here. Wandel Robinson is a 5'11", 185-pound wide receiver. He played for Nebraska, and in 2021, he transferred to Kentucky. And in his first season at Kentucky, he broke the school record for number of catches with 104 and the number of receiving yards, 1,334 with 7 touchdowns. He is a kick returner, and he also played a little bit of running back as well. He was the MVP of the 2022 Citrus Bowl, which Kentucky won, by the way. I'm a Kentucky boy, so that may be one of the reasons why I know a little bit about him. He also won the Paul Canadian Hog talks a lot about like intangibles and leadership and like character. Well, this kid, Wandel Robinson, won the Paul Hornung Award in 2018 in high school for the best high school football player in Kentucky. So he's had a career where he set the bar high. I mean, he goes to Kentucky in 1 year and breaks school records. It's pretty amazing. He's very quick. He's elusive. Some people say he would be like a gadget player at the NFL, but I think he's going to be a really great slot receiver. And the kind of guys that he reminds me of, somebody called him a slower Tyreek Hill. Cole Beasley is probably a good comparison, or probably the low end would be like a Brandon Cooks type player. So I really love him. And then the last guy, I think Burgundy Burner has a man crush on this one because I have seen him comment about Calvin Austin. And Calvin Austin is a Memphis. He's a player. He's a redshirt senior. He's a little guy, 5'8", 170 pounds. He also ran a blazing 40, a 4.32. In 2021, he had 74 catches for almost 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. He almost duplicated that in the previous season. So he's had 2 seasons where he was the leading receiver in his conference. Very shifty, very fast. One of the scouts described him as a separation factory, which I thought was kind of funny. And he's just a very explosive guy, small, but he's fast, he's shifty, and he and he has some speed. Of course, the size is always a concern, but you're not going to be asking this guy to clear out the middle, right, for the running back or whatever. You're gonna use him as a deep ball or slot receiver threat. So those are the guys that I honed in on.
Isn't Williams the one coming off an Achilles?
In ACL.
ACL. I'm sorry.
Yeah, both my top guys are coming off injury. One's an ankle fracture in Drake Landon, and then Williams had the ACL.
I really like what I see from Williams too, but that's a gamble. Certainly at 11, that would be a gamble.
Most of the mocks that I've looked at in the last week or so have London going 10 to the Jets right ahead of us, which should be really sad. I feel sorry for the guy if he goes to the Jets, because that's like the place wide receivers go to die.
Wide receiver purgatory.
It is. It's horrible. I mean, you think about all the brilliant wide receiver talent that's gone there over the years and then done absolutely nothing because, well, it's the Jets.
I don't want to say we can't lose if we go wide receiver at 11. I'm tempted to say it though, because again, they take him, we'll take Olave, or there's so many good wide receivers. It's just a matter of picking the ones that are going to really be the stars. And Burks, I like. He's not super fast, but he's got good size. He's another guy that like does the 50-50 ball thing really well. I mean, he's just aggressive and goes and gets the ball. But yeah, we're and now watch. I predict that we will not pick a wide receiver in the draft after all of that.
Of all the guys you talked about, John, and actually all the guys I've seen as far as wide receivers are concerned, I think London's the guy I like best. And largely I like him best because he's really the only big body.
I feel like we have the speed.
And we don't
have the speed covered, we got blazing speed already.
That's the thing. We don't need another, 6 foot 190, 6 foot 200 guy. We've got the market cornered on 6 foot 200-pound wide receivers that can get after it. And, between McLaren and Samuel and De'Ami Brown, I look at our wide receiving core and I go, what we're missing is that big guy that goes out there and muscles the cornerback. He's open at 12 yards every single play, just like Art Monk.
We've never
I
had
thought about
that.
Art Monk.
We haven't had that guy since Monk, really.
No, we really haven't.
And Monk was 6'2". He wasn't the real, but he was physical. But imagine, I've never seen a guy like with a Calvin Johnson body in a Washington uniform ever.
No, you're right. And I said since Monk, but I in my head, Monk is bigger, but that's because in those days cornerbacks were smaller.
I was gonna say Monk was only 6'2", but corners were 5'11", not 6'3".
Right. Monk was playing against 5'10", 5'11" guys, not 6'1", 6'2" guys.
Yeah, they had players like London back then. They called them tight ends.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, if we're gonna go wide receiver at 11, and I don't know, I don't know what we do at 11. If other players were rated more highly, I know exactly what we do at 11. We draft another linebacker. I'm not sure there's a middle linebacker out there worth the 11th pick in the draft.
There's only one. That's sort of a consensus first rounder. And
we'll talk about that next week.
Full disclosure to our fans, I came here tonight prepared to talk about linebackers because I missed the memo. I don't think we're drafting a linebacker at 11. McShay has us taking Devin Lloyd, and that's the one guy that I think is a consensus first rounder, but that might be a little high at 11.
Yeah.
I've heard Kyle Hamilton's name thrown out there a lot. I know he's not a linebacker, but
he's not, but he's blue chip and looks like they're calling him a unicorn. So, there's only a few blue chip players that aren't at positions of need. I would have a hard time feeling bad about Hamilton if he fell to us.
Well, I think we're in a really good position. I really do. I think they can let I know it's a cliche to say let the draft come to you, but I feel like in this draft, that's exactly what they'll do.
Well, and you touched on a really big possibility at 11. If people start getting antsy, that 11th pick might look pretty attractive to somebody. I would not mind this year. If there's not a blue chip guy we're in love with at 11, I'd really be okay with trading back this year. And I'm generally not a trade down guy.
No, I'm not either, but I agree with you, Mark. If we can't, in all honesty, London's the only guy I'm thrilled with at 11 that I've looked at so far, either side of the ball, any position. Otherwise, I am more than happy to drop back into the mid-teens or even down to Pittsburgh at 20. There's still going to be some really good wide receiver talent available there. And that position makes a guy like Devin Lloyd look better too. So anyway.
Hey,
Yeah, I've seen
John.
Lloyd as high as 11 and as low as like 28. I don't think he's going to 28, but
Hey,
Yeah,
John, the one thing that I wanted to mention in regards to the names that you were mentioning for wide receiver, I really liked that list that you compiled, because when I was listening to you talk about a lot of the guys, the impression I got was that there are not very many of the guys that you brought up that are Terry McLaurin clones. And my fear is that if we go draft a Terry McLaurin clone, it potentially opens the door to making it easier to say goodbye to him. And you don't say goodbye to Terry McLaurin. You do whatever you need to do to keep him here long-term at all costs. And we essentially need a guy who's going to complement his skill set. Again, my fear is a clone, opens that door up to, potentially making that decision become a little bit more easy if cost and price of Terry McLaurin becomes a factor down the road.
I also think that we really want to believe that Diami Brown's going to be that outside guy because of his speed, but there's no guarantee that he is. And so if you can get somebody that can play outside opposite Terry as insurance, I think that's also, I wouldn't be it wouldn't be my first choice for them to go with a guy that can only play slot, because we have guys that can do that serviceably. And Curtis Samuels, if he's healthy, I mean, you don't get much better than him. I just think we need somebody that puts pressure on the opposite side of the field from McLaurin, so he's not, getting blanketed on every pass.
a 6'4" athlete on the outside in the red zone sounds pretty attractive to me right now.
And he likes to go across the middle too, which we haven't had that in a while.
To play devil's advocate, though, you guys you're kind of looking at Logan Thomas and Cam Sims.
Well, Thomas, I mean, I got no problem with a tight end being a big guy too, an athletic guy, but we don't have somebody on the outside like that.
Here's
Cam
my
Sims. I'd like Cam Sims to be that guy, but not until I see it.
I don't trust Cam Sims yet. And to be honest with you, I don't trust Logan Thomas to stay healthy for a 17-game season and be available in the playoffs. He may play 12 games, but the problem is when he's injured, he's done. It's not a case of, oh, he's going to be out a couple of games and then he's going to come back and play in the playoffs. The dude has a tendency to be finished when he gets hurt for the season. And with Carson Wentz at this point, quite frankly, I think if we don't make the playoffs next year, it's criminal. I really just feel that way about it. I mean, I'm not saying
with the level of competition, with the change of our schedule, with I mean, Philly's got 3 first-round picks, but nobody's looking at them like they're a powerhouse. The Giants are, again, the Giants. The Cowboys, I mean, we've done an NFC East pod. We'll probably do one later after the dust settles. But I think the consensus will be that the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to be in the conversation with the Cowboys that we thought we were going to be in last year.
Right.
Certainly our new ownership group is going to expect a playoff berth this year.
That would be nice. But you guys were talking about
bravo.
I think it's our social media influencers going to put us over the top, man, in the division.
You guys were talking about maybe losing McLaurin, but I'm starting to look at the dynamic of the NFL, and I don't think the way it's going now, I don't think teams look at wide receivers like you can ever have enough. They look at them the way they did pass rushers about 3 or 4 years ago.
I'm glad you said that. I was thinking about that, watching Tampa and LA the last couple of years, loading up.
Not only them, but look at Cincinnati. They had T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Joe Burrow got his knee blown up. Everybody was saying they need to draft a lineman, and they drafted Jamar Chase with their first-round pick, and they just happened to go to the Super Bowl for the first time in a millennium.
And you could argue Chase was as much a catalyst for that Super Bowl berth as Burrow.
Right. And so So at some point, I think we need to realistically say, weapons be damned, you can never have enough. Look at the way KC's been built the last couple of years. They just traded away arguably the best, one of the top 3 most explosive playmakers in the league, and they're like, okay, see ya, because they've got guys right behind them ready to come up. Now obviously none of them are Tyreek Hill, but weapons upon weapons. You mentioned Tampa, the Rams. They have Cooper Kupp, and they just went and spent and got Beckham to help carry them to a Super Bowl victory. So I think at drafting another explosive playmaker, all it means is that you have just another mismatch on the field.
I'm going to be devastated if we lose McLaurin, because I just get the vibe. I've convinced myself he's not Kirk Cousins. He's not Brandon Scherf, who says, gives us all the lip service, but they're really out the door, a year before they're out the door. I feel like he's a core guy. And along with John Allen, he's like the heart and soul of the team. And I know Paul talks about this stuff. I really think that matters, especially in Washington, where there's turmoil swirling all around the team at all times. You really need those steady guys that keep everyone focused and say the right things and do the right things. So, and he's convinced me he wants to be in Washington, and I just hope he really is that guy, because I think it would be devastating to lose him.
I gotta play. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. I keep interrupting. Go ahead, Derek.
I was gonna say, I gotta play devil's advocate here, though, and I gotta ask you, John, is it possible he doesn't want to be here?
I guess it's possible if he's like looking at his legacy in terms of he could have 2,000 yards if he had Russell Wilson throwing to him, or
he doesn't scream to me the guy. If anything, he doesn't scream to me the guy that's worried about legacy as much as he's worried about character. He might not want to play for this.
Possibly wants. I mean, there's a lot of reasons guys decide they don't want to be here. Their girlfriend or their wife doesn't like it here, or their family somewhere else. There's tons of reasons why people decide, or they just want to. It's exciting to have some suitor offer you a gazillion money, and you're the brand new shiny toy, and that's an exciting thing. That would be for anybody.
I think a big X factor right now with Terry McLaurin is going to be what kind of relationship he develops with Carson Wentz, and if they are on the same page, because his life looks very different with Carson Wentz playing well than it might have with Taylor Heineke playing well.
That's true.
I think he's got this year. I think we'll say a lot about whether he stays or goes, how he works with Carson.
I've always had the impression with McLaurin that if he puts up 2 catches for 15 yards and the team wins, he had a good day.
He seems like that.
And if he puts up 12 catches for 225 and 4 touchdowns and the team loses, he's going to be pissed off.
Okay, well, my response to that, and I question again, and I'm not saying that I believe this or that I'm dead set on it, but I'm just dot connecting here. He could easily look at this team and say, I've busted my ass and we've won 7 games last year and 7 games this year.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, Mark, if they go into this season and they end up with an 8-9 record, he might look at this and say, I don't care that I got 1,500 yards this year as Carson Wentz. I want to go win. That's what he really cares about, because like you said, he could have 2 catches for 15 yards and the team win the football game, and that's what he enjoys the most. So he might look at it and say, yeah, I could play here, or I could go to Kansas City.
Yeah, we speculate a lot. There's so many different ways you could look at it, right? You could also make the case that maybe Terry McLaurin's the kind of guy who says, I want to be a part of building something.
That's all completely valid.
Or it's almost beyond our ability to imagine it. But what if like all of our offensive weapons stay healthy? Gibson and Thomas and Curtis Samuel, and we add a weapon, and our offensive line plays great, and our defense shows up from week 1.
We're crazy.
A playoff team, and we're the Commanders are going to the playoffs in their inaugural season. So, I mean, I agree with you. What are the odds of that happening in Washington? We know we're kind of a beleaguered bunch. So
well, it's going to happen someday. Someday it is going to happen. It could be this year. So there.
Okay, my whole point to that story was, John, if that is the mentality, We'll probably never know it. But if that is the mentality, does it hurt a lot less knowing that you let him go? And is it a prudent move to now draft a wide receiver at 11, knowing that he's not coming back?
I don't know, man. I guess the one thing I haven't said about it is, if there's ever a player that you just open up the damn pocketbook and
I know he's it.
for who he could be if he had some help versus what you think is a reasonable offer, he's the guy you open up the pocketbook for. You show him the money and show him the love, just like Jerry
So
McLaurin.
I do want to qualify. I'm not advocating you trade Terry McLaurin. In fact, I think it's detrimental, because all you would do is, people are floating out there right now, what if you get a first and a third from Terry McLaurin? You only used a third on him, so you've netted a first. I said no, because now you're going to use your first trying to replace Terry McLaurin. So you've lost Terry McLaurin. You've got an unproven coming in the building.
Right. We don't know what any of those picks will do. They could be
So
plus. And now
I'm not justifying trading him. I'm just playing both sides of it, that we believe Terry McLaurin wants to be here, but we also don't know. There was a time I never thought Trent Williams would wear a different jersey. Let's just be real.
Yeah. I do think if you come to the conclusion that he's not going to sign a long-term deal here, trade his ass.
You got to do it
as soon as you can, because we've been burned too many times with that. We can't franchise. I don't want to ever franchise tag anyone ever again if we can avoid it. Joey Sly, maybe franchise tag him.
All right. I think of the last position group that we were going to talk about today. Bob, you had running backs?
I had running back. Yeah. And I'm going to preface my comments with stuff that you've heard from other guys tonight. And that is, I don't see a running back in the first or second round. I'm not sure I see a running back in the draft. Maybe. I see the possibility for the team thinking they need a running back, but I don't know. We talked a lot during podcast during the season about maybe picking up a guy in the off season that was something of an Antonio Gibson clone, right? We need that second guy in Antonio Gibson's mold, size-wise, speed-wise, that can do a lot of the same things he can, because again, Gibson's one of those guys that's a great talent, but he can't stay healthy. It seems like he misses. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Because if we draft a running back, and if we draft a running back high, I don't think we will, but if we were to draft a running back high, I think that's a signal that they're tired of Gibson putting the rock on the turf. And I think that's the only reason you look at replacing him at this point in time is because you're tired of the fumbleitis. But I'm not sure that that's the way Rivera works. I think Rivera would rather have the coaches work with Gibson significantly in the offseason to work on fixing that part of his game. Let's face it, the guy's still only 2 years into a career. Even for a running back, that's not elderly yet, right? Granted, running backs have a shorter shelf life than almost any other position in the NFL, but still, he should be good for a number of years yet. So I looked at this from the perspective of, we were more than likely, if we were going to draft a running back, it was going to be in that 4th or that 6th round position, right? We don't have a 5th round pick. We don't have a 3rd round pick. Ideally, in my world, we either take London with that 11th pick, or we draft back and we pick up 3rd and 5th round picks that we don't have today in that draft back option. But before I talk about the guys that I looked at for 4th and 6th, I find it interesting that the Redskins have met with 3 running backs so far out of this rookie class. And
Really?
They are rated 1, 2, and 3 in this class. Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, and Kenneth Walker III. They are the 1, 2, and 3 running backs in this draft, and I have not seen any of them picked in the 1st round in a mock draft yet. So all 3 of these guys could be available in the 2nd when we pick at, 42 or 47? 47 now.
7.
Used to be 42. Now it's 47. All 3 of these guys could potentially be available. In fact, I looked at a draft today where the very first running back off the board was Breece Hall out of Iowa State, and he went number 52. So it's possible we're looking at loading up on playmakers. with picks 1 and 2. That's absolutely possible. Although frankly, I think it's criminal if we don't spend one of those on middle linebacker. But anyway, we'll talk about that later, like next week. And we'll let Mark have the whole evening to talk because we know he can.
Careful.
So guys that I'm looking at in that 4th and 6th round, I immediately limited all of the players that I looked at to guys that kind of fit that same physical mold. Antonio Gibson's 6'2", 220. The lightest guy I looked at was 210, although I've seen his weight at like 3 different weights. I settled on the lighter weight, but I have seen him listed at 220 a couple of different places. So let's start at the bottom of the list. And the last guy that I looked at was Zamir White, and he will probably be available at 6. He's out of Georgia. He's 6 feet, 215, ran a 440. He's a very traditional power back. The guy excels between the tackles. He's great at taking that ball between the guard and the tackle and heading straight for the sideline with it. And if he gets to the sideline, the dude's gone. He's got straight line speed like a wide receiver. And in the highlight clips, you watch him time after time get to the outside by starting but inside the tackle and then bouncing it back outside after he clears the line of scrimmage and just running away from DBs. Here's the real, the dig with him. He tore his right ACL in 2017 as a freshman, and he tore his left ACL in 2018 as a sophomore and ended up redshirting his sophomore season. That second ACL tear was like the second day of summer camp before the season even started.
So the good news is he's out of ACLs to tear, man. We're going.
Well, that's the thing. Funny as it is, I mean, he had 2 horrible injuries in back-to-back years. He came back in 2019 healthy, and he's been completely healthy ever since. He's had no significant medical problems. The guy accelerates really quick in the backfield, hits the hole fast. He would make a great zone back, one cut, make a decision, go kind of guy. Because he's missing that elite cutback ability. He's not going to be that guy. He's not Barry Sanders. It's not going to happen. He's going to trip over himself if he tries some of that stuff. He's very much a straight line weapon. But his highlights are fantastic. I really like some of the stuff that I saw out of him in those highlights. The next guy that I looked at, and I'm working towards the top of the list at this point, Hassan Haskins out of Michigan. The other thing I did was I stayed in big conferences. I didn't look at guys that came from smaller conferences. I wanted guys that had actually played against dudes that are going to play on Sunday this year, next year, the year after. Hassan Haskins out of Michigan. He's 6'1", 220, runs a 4.58, which sounds slow. He doesn't look that slow on tape to me. Again, he's another downhill guy, all straight line speed. He doesn't have breakaway speed. You never see that extra gear. But amazingly enough, in the highlight packages I watched, you don't find many guys catching him from behind either. The thing that sets him apart on this list is he actually has decent hands. He might be able to do some of the things that Gibson and McKissick can do. Granted, I don't feel like we use Gibson enough in the passing game, but when we do, he's got really good hands. And if we're going to bring in another guy to potentially spell him either when he's tired or when he's hurt, it needs to be somebody that can do all the same kinds of things. And Haskins has decent hands. He also has fairly decent blocking skills already for a guy that was a lead back in college and didn't have to do much in the way of blocking, either pass protection or run blocking for anybody else in the backfield. He's capable of taking a man and doing something with him. Again, not explosive, not elusive out in the open field. It's all power. DBs have a problem bringing him down, but it's all because of his size and ability to shrug things off. Could be a decent short yardage option too. There's a lot of short yardage plays in his highlight package that looks really good. He also runs through tackles. There are any number of plays where he didn't get great blocking up front. He had guys in the backfield from the defense, and he made the first guy miss, or he ran through the first guy and then right through the line of scrimmage and was gone. So a lot of good things there, a lot of possibilities. And then the last guy, the one that really intrigues me, and I don't know, John, you may have seen him because he's at North Carolina State, Zonovan Knight, 5'11". He's listed at 210 in the last place that I looked, but I've seen him as much as 220. And again, another 4.58 guy. But I look at his YouTube highlights and I'm like, I don't understand 4.58. He doesn't look like a 4.58 guy. He's running away from people, consistently running away from people. I don't know. He just looks fast. He's a serious athletic talent. Now he's going to take some coaching. He's not quite as polished as maybe Haskins and White are at this point in his career. A little bit of coaching. His pass blocking is definitely going to be an issue if we're going to ask him to do that. He doesn't do that well. At this point in time, it kind of consists of, throwing himself at whoever's coming through, throwing himself at the legs of whoever's coming through the line and praying a lot. He's also not a receiver, or at least isn't known as a receiver. They didn't throw to him a lot, so it's hard to tell. But one assumes that if they're not throwing to him, it's largely because maybe he can't catch the ball. Shows really nice burst. He also shows really good vision. He finds the hole well. He slips through really small spaces, shows a lot of patience. And the dude's got a tremendous stiff arm. You watch his highlight package, and in almost every single play, he's putting somebody on the ground with a hand that's trying and picking up another 5-6 yards. His highlight package doesn't consist of 40 and 50 yard runs. It is 18 to 25 yard carry after 18 to 25 yard carry, and every single one of them he broke 3 tackles to get there. I like the tenacity. And you talk about running backs, the old phrase, he runs violently. I feel like this kid runs kind of violently. He didn't
talked about wanting a hammer around here.
Yeah, and that's kind of what he reminds me of. The biggest downside that I see tonight at this point in time is that he didn't show a tremendous jump between his junior and senior year. The numbers those 2 years are very similar. So the question then becomes, has he peaked? And I don't know whether that's the case or not, or whether some coaching can do something for him. But those were the 3 guys that I took a really long, hard. I actually took a really long, hard look at 3 or 4 others. And after watching their highlight reels, I was like, I'm just not really sure about it. But these 3 guys all kind of jumped out at me. White bugs me because of the ACLs, although as John said, he's out of ACL. So, we should be okay there maybe. But one thinks that another ACL injury is the last, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm not real comfortable necessarily with that, but all of these guys remind me a little bit of Gibson, and they feel like guys that you could put in there and really pound the ball with, and none of them have a history of fumble problems.
So one of the things I was thinking about, Bob, as you were talking is we talked about Gibbs. I guess whether or not they go after a running back, especially if they go after one like, before day 3, it probably just depends on how they really feel about Gibson and also Jarrett Patterson, who we haven't talked about.
Right.
Gibson, he has an injury history, but if you think about it, the reason he has an injury history is because McKissick's been off the field, and we don't have a safety valve in Logan Thomas, who's not on the field. So they're pounding, they either pass to whatever wide receivers we have, which is a limited number of guys, or they're pounding Gibson. So I feel like if we had a more balanced offense, or if we had other running backs like a healthy McKissick, maybe Gibson would be more durable. He has played 14 games though, both seasons. So we can say he's got injury issues, but he's gutsy as hell, and he doesn't come off the field very often. He also only had 1 fumble in 2020 in 14 games, 1. So this
Gibson?
whole fumbleitis thing, Gibson. So
it's all recent then.
Yes. So it could be one of those things like that year where Rippon fumbled it. Although again, Mark and I noted even after all the fumbles, he carries it. He does not bring the ball in close. He just carries it outside. So, but I'm just saying maybe they can coach him up on that. Maybe it's not going to be a career-long thing. And then Jarrett Patterson, I'm not a huge Jarrett Patterson believer, but I don't know what the team thinks. I don't know what Rivera and Scott Turner think about him. I think he was kind of reach kind of a project pick. But
Oh, he
maybe
was
I'm
undrafted,
wrong.
wasn't he?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was
I guess it was.
undrafted.
Yeah.
I think the way I would put it, John, is I'm like you. I'm not a believer. I'm a fan. I'm rooting for the kid
Yeah.
because it's a great story. But am I sold? And the answer at this point in time is no, I'm not sold. And you're
Unless they put
absolutely
him in
right.
there at return duties. If they put him out there at return duties, which I think is possible, and he lights it up, maybe that's where he finds his niche. I don't know. Or maybe he proves me wrong and he does great things this year. I don't know. But we kind of forgot to mention him because he is in the mix.
Yeah.
With-
And after listening to you guys talk a little bit tonight, I'm not completely unconvinced that we couldn't go wide receiver, running back in the first and second rounds.
I think it's possible.
I don't know. Actually, I do know. I wouldn't be thrilled with that. I don't know that I would feel good about that. I certainly wouldn't be. I might be thrilled come December, but I wouldn't be thrilled in May.
It depends on which running back it is.
Yeah, I don't see it. I've never changed my mind on this going way back. If you can get a blue chip guy, I would never take one in the top 10. Every year you see running backs emerge out of nowhere, out of the free agency market. Guys looking for heading into their second contracts, who have learned how to play in the league.
Well, look at
Just could
McKissick.
sell.
Yeah, look at
Guys
McKissick.
like
Yeah.
McKissick, you see it year after
Or
year
guys
after
that teams
year.
that have given up on, like Leonard Fournette. I mean,
Yeah.
guys that everyone's written off, their career's over, Adrian Peterson, and then we find out in the right scenario they can still be a dominant back,
I mean, I can see taking a running back in the later rounds who can maybe contribute on special teams as well and be a depth guy, but I'm not looking for a rotational back in the draft. I'm just maybe third round, but that I've always been weird about that.
Well,
if we trade back from 11, I think it gets a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe that's why we've talked to Hall, Spiller, and Walker, is because we feel like a trade back from 11 is an absolute viable option. And maybe we end up with a second round pick or a high third round pick out of the deal. And ending up in that kind of a position, you may very well be in a position to pick one of the top 3 guys in the draft. And all of them have the kind of size and the kind of speed that Gibson's got and could potentially be, that guy. We could end up with a quote unquote 2-headed monster, right? Although I think we already have a 2-headed monster in Gibson and McKissick. McKissick showed, I feel like McKissick is tremendously underrated from the line of scrimmage.
All year until he got hurt.
I know.
We've said, get the ball to McKissick more.
He's not going to sneak up on anybody this year. There's a lot of film of what we can do with him, so they'll be watching him.
He wasn't sneaking up on anybody in the second half of last year.
Yep. Still getting it done though.
And he was still getting it done. I think
So
I'm with you guys. I don't draft a running back probably day 1 ever. Maybe the second half of day 2. If it's a guy like if Breece Hall is there in the 3rd round and we have acquired a 3rd round pick from trading back from 11, I mean, that guy it's just too easy at that point. But the days of the Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, top 10 running back pick, I think they're gone. I think offenses are starting to realize, obviously, if you look at the pay scale, look how much more Christian Kirk is getting $18 million a year. And J.D. McKissick, who was exponentially more productive than him and obviously more influential in the offense, is making 3.5.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute, And I don't know if it's the volatility, the fact that, wide receivers get hurt, but at any given play, a running back's career can go from being ascending to descending very quickly. So they don't want to invest that much, but.
And just the shelf life alone argues not to go crazy, because look at Christian McCaffrey, the guy's, I mean, he's just an unbelievably dynamic player, but how long is his career going to be?
Yeah.
And you're already seeing it where he can't stay on the field. So that's the other factor. I
Derrick
think.
Henry, and Derrick Henry's got the physique supposedly to take the beating, and yet he doesn't seem to be able to finish the season either. I'm the only exception to your rule, Derek. I would take a guy first day if I was if I believed I was getting a generational talent. And by that, I mean a Barry Sanders. Not just a guy that's going to be an amazing cog in my offense, but a guy that people are going to want to show up to see. He's not just a great player, but he's the kind of player that puts butts in seats individually, to steal from other sports. He's Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. People come just to see them play, right? They're not. I'm not even a basketball fan, and I'll spend tickets to come see Kobe or Michael play a game, or Leo Messi or Ronaldo.
Haven't been that many guys at running back like that, right?
Yeah, but
Saquon Barkley
was supposed to be that guy.
Yeah, and it's just that position, man. It's a short shelf life, like John was saying. Anyway, then you got a guy who's going to be your feature back, and you're going to run him 25 times a game. And the other team, their entire defensive scheme is to shut down superstar running back. So, but I agree. If you can get a Barry Sanders, yes. If you can show me ahead of time,
if you can get Barry Sanders, if you can get Adrian Peterson,
yeah.
If you can get that kind of a player,
but they're the exceptions that kind of prove the rule to me.
Exactly. And see, I didn't feel Barkley was ever that guy. To quote the other guys in the league making that kind of money, I didn't feel like Ezekiel Elliott. Not Thomas. I didn't feel like Elliott was that kind of guy. And yet the Cowboys just think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Well, maybe not so much anymore. My golf buddy up here, Paul's a lifelong Dallas fan, and he'll speak to me honestly about him. And he says that's the biggest weight and anchor around that team's neck right now is
the Cowboys.
The money they're paying that guy is hamstring.
You're right. There are a lot of fans that feel that way, but
the team doesn't.
But to keep Elliott, they moved
Amari Cooper.
Yep. They traded Amari Cooper for what amounts to a bag of groceries.
Yeah. And Zeke isn't even the best running back on that team.
No, Pollard was killing him the end of the season. Yeah.
So if I had done my homework, we would have talked about tight ends here. That's the one offensive group we didn't talk about, but I've been thinking about it during the podcast. We have potentially a starting dynamic tight end in Logan Thomas, who any NFL team would be happy to start, but we don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. We have a young guy in John Bates who showed last year he can play. He's not a dynamic receiver, but he's a tight end who can contribute, maybe in a poor man's Jason Witten down the road, which would be a pretty good contribution. So if the team were interested in filling out that room a little bit more in the draft, from what I'm seeing this year, we're certainly not going to take one at 11. And I don't see a single tight end I've been looking at the compendia here. The highest rated tight end I'm seeing is a second rounder, this Trey McBride out of, was it Michigan State?
Colorado State.
Sorry, it's green.
It's okay.
Who's a big guy and caught 90 balls in his senior 4-year starter. I don't know that he's dynamic enough. I think if we are going to do tight end in this draft, it'll probably be maybe 4th round if they're in love with the guy. So what I will do is I want to go see if I can find a potential dynamic Logan Thomas replacement in the later rounds that I might find some highlights for and see if that's the kind of guy that maybe we'd be looking at late, who can also contribute on teams.
They have met with a tight end, Mark, just to, if you're curious. Jalen Whitemeyer out of Texas A&M.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's the number 2 ranked guy in the draft, and currently they're thinking he'll go late 2nd, early 3rd.
I'm seeing him projected as a 4th here.
Are you really?
Yeah. So
the argument for a tight end, even though we think, well, do we really want to spend a pick when we have limited picks on a tight end? But the argument is we have Logan Thomas, who, you have to be worried about his ability to stay on the field. And Bates, I thought, was a pleasant surprise last year, but that's it. With Sammis Reyes, are we really going to, I kind of feel like they just either show the guy can play or get him the hell off the roster and put somebody else in there. I'm not a big believer in charity projects. Even if he looks great without a shirt on, that's great. But I mean, I know that's part of the NFL program and everything, and that's all well and good, but I just don't. Has anyone seen any evidence that that guy can play tight end in the NFL? Because I haven't.
He hasn't yet. So that's what I'm saying. I think I could see where they would be interested in a guy who could be a potential Logan Thomas replacement or backup down
Hey,
the road.
Mark, take a look at Jelani Wood from
Oh, Virginia. Yeah, he'd be a good one. He'd be a
He's
very good.
6'7", 259 pounds. He ran a 4.6.
Yeah. He can play, man, and he's not a guy that a lot of people, it's Virginia, for God's sake, and I went to get it.
Well, but he spent his first
Virginia.
he spent his first 3 years at Oklahoma State and was like lost because they never throw to him. So he transferred, played 1 year at UVA, and put up amazing numbers.
He's tough, man. After the catch, he's just like he's a beast to bring down. He's very physical.
The report I read on him indicated that if he'd played 4 years at UVA the same way,
yeah, he'd probably be a first or second rounder.
He'd be one of the top tight ends in this draft.
Derek, weren't you pointing me towards Jake Ferguson?
I liked Jake Ferguson after last season, but he took a regression this year. It was almost like he didn't. I can't explain it. His stock dropped, which is not normal for a guy that's. I mean, he was a 3-year starter at Wisconsin, right?
4.
Well, I mean, going into this season, he was a 3-year starter.
Oh yeah. Well, he raised his catches. He's 46 catches last year.
But I don't know that he's going to be a dynamic receiving threat. I think he's going to be a lot closer to Bates than he is to Thomas.
Right. And I don't think we need to go that direction at this point.
Again, he's another big body. He's 6'5", 250. But I believe if you read up a lot of his draft analysis, a lot of people say that he's going to be more geared towards that versatile role of being able, you can use him in your blocking packages. He can play teams. He'll give you some catches, but he's not going to be a dynamic. He's much, like I said, he's probably, everything I've read, he's a lot closer to Bates than he is to Thomas.
He's the 4.8 guy, so he's not going down he's not going deep for you.
Yeah, right. I would love Lonnie, man. If we could pull that off, that would be a definite end of the second day pick. That would be worth it, I think.
Nicely done, gents.
So guys, we would be remiss if there's so much going on right now, but we would be remiss if we didn't mention that there was terrible news last weekend. We heard about Dwayne Haskins passing away. And I know probably all of us have the same emotions about that. Just obviously the fact that you're 24 and all the things that we've got going for us, our families and our wives, and being with people for a long time and kids, all of that stuff, I just can't imagine what his parents are going through. But I know I felt guilty for every negative thing I've ever said about a young Mr. Haskins out of frustration over football, but kind of makes you realize, that we need to dial that kind of stuff back quite a bit and maybe be a little bit more respectful of players and remember they're human beings because you never know what's going to happen. But anyway, I hated to hear that. I just was so shocked when I saw that.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, seriously. Regardless of what you felt about him on the field, he is still a person.
And I know we all did that. That happens anytime a public figure dies that we've either liked or disliked and opined about what kind of human beings they are. And then when one of them dies, particularly, at 24, my youngest child is older than Dwayne Haskins. So I think
we think we know them. I think that's the thing we need to be careful of is we think we know Dwayne because of he went and signed autographs, before the game was over, and we we make assumptions about that kind of thing, but we really don't know these guys. Their families and their friends and their loved ones know them, and we really don't. So we just need to. It's just something. It's human nature. We all do it, but I just hated to hear. I know we all hated to hear that, and I don't know what more you can say about that other than I hope his family's okay and is able to find some kind of peace in it. I can't imagine that. I really can't. That's like the worst possible thing you could experience.
Amen, brother. All right. Well, I believe we're going to try to reconvene next week and take a look at the defensive side of the ball. We are T-minus 15 days from the NFL draft starting.
Woohoo.
So things are going to get interesting. And randomly, if you're listening and watching or doing whatever, we do have a little thread going on where competition to see who can pick the best or try to predict the draft. So if you could jump over to bgobsession.com and again, jump on there, follow this draft, the thread dedicated to this podcast. There's gonna be some highlights and stuff like that. Maybe some little blurbs and breakdowns of the guys that we talked about.
Yes, definitely come by and play Paul's exciting predict the draft game, and you'll get some kind of a cheap token if you win.
All right, fellas. We will talk soon.
Hail.
Thanks,
Hail.
guys.